What if I told you that every time you believed something comforting but false, you were digging a grave for your own power? The greatest danger is not open attack, but the subtle poison of deception, lies that you tell yourself, lies that others cultivate around you. If you wish to rule, to influence, to dominate without surrendering, you must learn to recognize these treacherous illusions before they destroy everything you have built. Power is a fragile jewel, coveted by all but held by few. Many strive for influence, yet they falter, not because their enemies are stronger, but because they are deceived by the most insidious of forces, lies. Lies that are whispered, repeated, and embraced without scrutiny. Today, we will uncover the perilous falsehoods that strip even the mightiest leaders of their authority and leave them vulnerable to ruin. Imagine a ruler who believes that kindness alone is the cornerstone of authority, a leader who assumes that generosity, loyalty, and fairness will secure the devotion of all those around him. Such a leader walks confidently through the corridors of power, smiling at allies, forgiving betrayals, and trusting that goodwill is a shield that no enemy can penetrate. But Machiavelli, with the cold clarity of one who has observed the rise and fall of princes and kingdoms, warns that this belief is not virtue, it is a trap. The lie of perpetual goodwill is one of the most dangerous illusions a leader can hold, for it blinds him to the true nature of those he governs, leaving him vulnerable to betrayal and ruin. Humans, Machiavelli argues, are not creatures of consistent loyalty. Their hearts are not bound by gratitude or moral duty, but by self-interest and desire. A man may appear loyal when all is well, yet the first opportunity for personal gain can dissolve that loyalty in an instant. When a ruler assumes that his generosity guarantees unwavering support, he misjudges the instincts of others. Those who seem most devoted may, when circumstances shift, become the architects of his downfall. History is littered with princes who fell not because of superior enemies, but because they were deceived by the very people they considered friends. The lesson is clear: goodwill alone is a weak fortress, and those who rely upon it are inviting disaster. Consider the illusion of the beloved leader, the one who showers gifts, rewards loyalty, and forgives past transgressions. This ruler believes that because he has acted with kindness, his subjects and allies are bound to him by invisible chains of gratitude. He smiles at compliments, nods at flattery, and assumes that those who benefit from his generosity will never turn against him. But Machiavelli reminds us that human nature is not predictable in this way. Gratitude is fleeting, and dependence upon it is perilous. Those who are given much often feel entitled to more, and when denied, they may become resentful or opportunistic. In the realm of power, kindness without strategy is not benevolence, it is vulnerability. The danger is magnified when a ruler fails to recognize the duality of human motives. People are rarely purely loyal or purely treacherous. Their allegiance shifts with circumstances. A ruler who operates under the assumption that goodwill alone secures loyalty is blind to these shifting sands. Machiavelli writes that one must observe, test, and understand the motives of others constantly. To assume that kindness is a guarantee is to place oneself at the mercy of chance, relying on the virtue of others rather than one's own cunning. Those who fall into this trap often discover too late that the very hands they fed can strike the sharpest blow. Machiavelli illustrates this principle with countless examples from history. Princes and leaders who trusted entirely in goodwill were often betrayed by ministers, allies, or even family members. A king might forgive a rebellious noble, only to see that noble rise in power and plot the king's downfall. A general might spare the life of a defeated adversary, believing in their loyalty, only to have that same adversary return with greater force to reclaim what was lost. The pattern repeats itself endlessly, where trust is untested and kindness unquestioned. Ambition and self-interest find fertile soil. It is crucial to distinguish between genuine strategy and naive benevolence. Machiavelli does not suggest that a leader should be cruel or unjust without reason, but he insists that goodwill must be paired with vigilance and calculation. Generosity is only a tool when it serves the preservation and expansion of power. It becomes a liability when it is granted blindly, without understanding the true character and motives of those who receive it. To give without discernment is to feed the wolves while hoping they remain tame. Moreover, perpetual goodwill creates a false sense of security. A ruler surrounded by sycophants and those who accept favors may come to believe that betrayal is impossible, that loyalty is natural, and that gratitude is eternal. This false security dulls perception, making the leader slow to detect threats, slow to respond to schemes, and slow to assert authority when necessary. By the time the danger becomes apparent, it is often too late to act effectively. Machiavelli's warning is clear. Power is not maintained by virtue alone, and a leader who forgets this lesson is already on the path to downfall. The lie of perpetual goodwill also extends to the ruler's relationship with the masses. Many believe that generosity, fairness, and moral rectitude will win the hearts of the people and secure their obedience. Yet the populace, like the elite, is governed primarily by self-interest. They will follow, support, or praise a leader when it benefits them and abandon him when it does not. A leader who relies on goodwill as a shield against popular dissent is courting disaster. Machiavelli teaches that it is far wiser to balance benevolence with strength, fairness with fear, and generosity with calculated restraint. Power is preserved not by being loved universally, but by being respected and understood as a force that commands attention and obedience. In practice, this means that a wise leader must constantly evaluate the effects of his actions, testing the loyalty of allies and subjects, understanding their desires, and preparing for betrayal as a natural element of human interaction. Generosity must never blind a ruler to the realities of ambition, envy, and opportunism. To survive, a leader must wield goodwill strategically as a means of influence and leverage, not as a guarantee of loyalty. Ultimately, the lie of perpetual goodwill is seductive because it appeals to our desire for moral virtue and trust in human decency. It flatters the ego, presenting the ruler as magnanimous, beloved, and just. But Machiavelli strips away this comforting illusion, revealing the stark truth. Those who rely solely on goodwill are defenseless. Power, he asserts, is not maintained by virtue alone. It is maintained by vigilance, discernment, and the unflinching recognition of human nature. To embrace kindness as a weapon rather than a shield is to navigate the treacherous world of power with a blade in hand, ready to defend against the inevitable treachery that goodwill alone cannot prevent. Many leaders are seduced by the notion that honesty is the highest virtue. They believe that if they speak only the truth, conduct themselves with integrity, and reveal their intentions openly, power will naturally follow them, and enemies will respect them. This, however, is one of the deadliest illusions a ruler can harbor. Machiavelli warns us that absolute truthfulness is not a virtue in the realm of power. It is a weakness. To cling to truth without discretion is to arm one's enemies while leaving oneself defenseless, for the world of influence is ruled not by idealism, but by cunning, strategy, and the relentless pursuit of advantage. Truth, in its purest form, is inflexible. It is an unyielding force that demands consistency, clarity, and exposure. A leader who commits himself entirely to honesty assumes that the world operates under the same moral compass, that others value transparency and fairness above self-interest. But reality is far harsher. Humans are guided by ambition, fear, greed, and desire, and many will exploit the candor of a truthful leader for their own gain. Those who are honest without strategy often reveal not only their intentions, but also their weaknesses, their fears, and their vulnerabilities. Machiavelli understood that in the pursuit of power, knowledge is a weapon, and disclosure of one's hand is akin to laying down arms in the midst of battle. Consider the ruler who declares openly his plans, who shares his motives and strategies with those around him, believing that honesty will inspire trust. In this, he misunderstands human nature. People rarely act solely out of loyalty or gratitude. They act out of advantage. A subordinate, an ally, or even a supposed friend may use this transparency to anticipate, manipulate, or undermine the ruler's moves. The honest leader becomes predictable, and in predictability lies vulnerability. Machiavelli teaches that a wise leader must be like water, shapeless, adaptable, and capable of concealing his true depth and strength until the moment it is needed. Absolute truth offers no such camouflage. The danger of absolute truthfulness is magnified in diplomacy and political negotiation. Leaders who insist on total honesty in these arenas are often outmaneuvered by those who understand that strategy sometimes requires deception. To negotiate effectively is to balance revelation with concealment, to speak what serves one's purpose while withholding what might invite attack. Those who cling to complete transparency enter a battlefield of cunning, armed with nothing but a placid smile and a naive trust in the virtue of others. Machiavelli warns that this is a path to failure, for the world rewards not those who are morally righteous, but those who are strategically adept. Moreover, absolute truthfulness can erode authority in subtle ways. A leader who always admits mistakes, reveals doubts, or exposes weaknesses may believe he is demonstrating integrity, but in the eyes of others, he appears vulnerable, indecisive, and weak. Respect and fear are pillars of power. A ruler who disarms himself with excessive honesty risks losing both. Machiavelli understood that perception often outweighs reality in matters of power. A leader must cultivate the appearance of strength, decisiveness, and control, even when the reality is more nuanced. To expose oneself entirely through truth is to hand a sword to those who seek to strike. It is essential to recognize that Machiavelli does not advocate for mindless deceit or moral corruption for its own sake. He does not counsel a leader to live a life of lies, but rather to understand the strategic function of selective concealment. The ruler must know when to reveal the truth and when to mask it. Like a chess master, he must anticipate the moves of others, presenting information in a manner that serves his position, while shielding himself from exploitation. The lie of absolute truthfulness is the belief that transparency alone is sufficient to maintain power, and it is precisely this belief that invites manipulation and defeat. History provides endless examples of leaders undone by their faith in truth. Princes who disclosed their intentions were outflanked by cunning rivals. Generals who revealed strategic positions were ambushed. Diplomats who trusted in the honesty of others were deceived and humiliated. Machiavelli reminds us that these are not rare occurrences but recurring patterns. Power attracts the ambitious, the cunning, and the unscrupulous, and those who operate without strategic concealment are easy prey. Truth in isolation is not a shield, it is a vulnerability. Furthermore, the lie of absolute truthfulness is seductive because it appeals to the ego. Leaders take pride in their integrity, imagining that moral rectitude will earn admiration, loyalty, and obedience. Yet in the theater of power, the audience is rarely concerned with virtue, they are concerned with advantage. Respect is earned not solely through honesty, but through a combination of strength, shrewdness, and perceptive control over perception. To believe that truth alone will protect one from treachery is to misunderstand the nature of influence itself. A wise ruler, therefore, must practice a form of disciplined pragmatism. He must recognize that truth can be used as a tool when carefully applied, but that indiscriminate honesty is a liability. He must speak and act in ways that protect his interests, conceal his vulnerabilities, and manipulate perception in his favor. The art of leadership is as much about what is hidden as what is revealed. By understanding when to employ truth and when to veil it, a ruler commands not only respect, but fear and admiration, shaping the behavior of others in ways that ensure both survival and dominance. Many leaders labor under a dangerous illusion, the belief that they can please everyone, that they can win the favor of all those they govern, and that universal approval is both possible and necessary for their survival. This is the lie of universal acceptance, a seductive deception that preys upon the vanity of rulers and their desire to be admired. Machiavelli, with the piercing clarity of one who has observed the rises and falls of princes, warns that this is a path to indecision, weakness, and ultimately, destruction. To believe that every subject, ally, or rival can be satisfied is to ignore the fundamental nature of power and the inevitability of human ambition, envy, and dissent. In the pursuit of universal acceptance, a leader often sacrifices decisiveness for approval. Every decision becomes an exercise in seeking validation, every action measured against the possibility of disapproval. The ruler who fears offending any party is paralyzed by the weight of opinion, delaying necessary action, compromising his authority, and signaling weakness to both allies and adversaries. Machiavelli understood that leadership demands clarity, courage, and the ability to act decisively, even when actions are unpopular. A leader who strives to be loved by all loses the freedom to govern effectively and risks being seen as ineffectual. Consider the dynamics of envy and ambition. Even when a ruler acts with justice, fairness, and benevolence, he cannot escape the envy of those around him. Some will resent his success, some will covet his position, and others will seek advantage at his expense. To believe that pleasing everyone is possible is to ignore these inevitable human impulses. Those who seek universal acceptance often expend their energy trying to manage perception rather than cultivating genuine power. They may grant favors to quell discontent, bend to the demands of influential courtiers, or dilute their authority to appease critics. In doing so, they become manipulable, predictable, and ultimately powerless. Machiavelli teaches that attempting to win the approval of all is a recipe for instability, for the very people whose favor is sought are often those who harbor ambition and are waiting for opportunity. The lie of universal acceptance also undermines a leader's ability to wield fear and respect effectively. Machiavelli famously notes that it is safer for a ruler to be feared than loved when he cannot be both. Universal acceptance is an impossible standard, and the quest for it often leads leaders to compromise in ways that dilute their authority. To be respected and feared, a leader must make decisions that some will resent, confront opposition directly, and assert dominance when necessary. Those who cling to the idea of pleasing everyone fail to exercise the kind of calculated authority that preserves power. They become vulnerable to manipulation, revolt, and betrayal because they have prioritized affection over strength, popularity over influence. In addition, the pursuit of universal acceptance creates an illusion of consensus. Leaders may surround themselves with yes-men, flatterers, and sycophants who offer only affirmation, masking the reality of discontent that grows beneath the surface. This false consensus lulls the ruler into believing that he is universally supported, that his position is secure, and that his popularity is a shield against dissent. Machiavelli warns that this is a dangerous miscalculation. Real power is measured not by the absence of criticism, but by the ability to act decisively in the face of opposition, to command loyalty even when it is not freely given, and to navigate the ambitions of others with skill. Those who are obsessed with universal approval blind themselves to threats that are often hidden in plain sight. The lie of universal acceptance also encourages indecisiveness and mediocrity. A ruler who fears alienating any group will avoid bold action, preferring compromise and consensus to decisive leadership. Machiavelli recognized that greatness requires risk, confrontation, and the willingness to act in ways that are sometimes unpopular. History is filled with rulers who faltered because they sought approval above all else. They delayed reforms, avoided punishing treachery, and sacrificed strategic advantage to maintain superficial harmony. In doing so, they eroded authority, lost control over critical situations, and allowed opportunists to exploit the vacuum created by their weakness. To counter this dangerous illusion, a leader must understand the natural limitations of human desire and loyalty. Not everyone can be pleased, not every action will be admired, and not every subject will be content. A wise ruler focuses instead on the opinions that matter, the influential allies, the key power brokers, and the people whose loyalty is essential for maintaining authority. Machiavelli emphasizes that the goal is not universal love, but strategic influence. The ability to command respect, inspire obedience, and manage dissent is far more valuable than the vain pursuit of total approval. Finally, the lie of universal acceptance seduces because it appeals to vanity and the desire for validation. Leaders often mistake affection for power, admiration for security, and popularity for authority. Machiavelli strips away this comforting illusion, revealing that power is preserved not through universal acceptance, but through calculated control, decisiveness, and an unflinching understanding of human nature. Those who cling to the idea that they can be loved by all weaken themselves, waste precious energy, and invite the schemes of those who understand that influence is earned not through affection, but through a combination of strength, cunning, and strategic management of perception. Many leaders succumb to the most seductive of illusions, the belief that raw power alone is sufficient to secure their position, that the mere presence of strength is enough to silence opposition, command loyalty, and ward off danger. Machiavelli warns that this belief is a lie, a dangerous delusion that blinds rulers to the subtle, persistent threats that grow beneath the surface. Strength, when untested and unexamined, can become a weakness, for power is not a static possession. It is a dynamic condition that must be actively maintained, guarded, and exercised with vigilance and strategy. To believe otherwise is to invite downfall. The illusion of unchallenged strength often begins with arrogance. A ruler who has amassed victories, conquered rivals, or commanded obedience may begin to assume that his position is unassailable. Past successes become proof of invincibility, and the ruler grows complacent, mistaking appearance for substance. Machiavelli understood that strength is never permanent, and that the enemies of today may return tomorrow with greater cunning, allies, or resources. A leader who rests upon the laurels of past power risks being blindsided by shifts in loyalty, ambition, or opportunity that can topple even the mightiest throne. Strength untempered by vigilance also fosters overconfidence. Leaders who believe themselves unchallengeable act with boldness that borders on recklessness. They underestimate the ambitions of subordinates, the envy of rivals, and the cunning of those who plot in the shadows. Machiavelli observed that many princes fell not because their enemies were stronger, but because they were wiser, more patient, and more strategic. The ruler, who relies solely on the perception of strength, fails to anticipate the ingenuity of those who would see him fall. Absolute confidence in power often blinds a leader to the very vulnerabilities that need the most attention. The lie of unchallenged strength is also evident in the failure to prepare for internal threats. A ruler who believes that power itself is enough may neglect the subtle dynamics of influence within his court, army, or council. Ambitious ministers, jealous nobles, or opportunistic allies may quietly undermine authority, waiting for a moment of distraction or misjudgment. Machiavelli emphasizes that these internal threats are often more dangerous than external ones. A ruler who underestimates the potential for treachery within his own ranks assumes that strength alone can enforce loyalty, but loyalty is earned through a combination of respect, fear, and strategic manipulation, not simply by the projection of force. External threats, too, exploit the illusion of unassailable power. Rivals observe, test, and probe for weaknesses. A general who relies solely on the size of his army may be defeated by a smaller, more agile force that understands terrain, timing, and strategy. A ruler who relies only on wealth or influence may be outmaneuvered by those who cultivate alliances, perception, or cunning. Machiavelli teaches that power is maintained not through intimidation alone, but through active engagement, foresight, and the constant adaptation to changing circumstances. Strength that is assumed, rather than exercised with prudence, is brittle and vulnerable. The illusion of unchallenged strength can also breed isolation. A ruler who believes no one can threaten him may distance himself from allies, ignore counsel, and refuse to seek intelligence on the intentions of others. Machiavelli warns that this isolation is perilous, for power is not maintained in a vacuum. Even the strongest leader must understand the shifting loyalties, ambitions, and sentiments of those around him. By neglecting to engage with the subtleties of influence, a ruler creates blind spots that clever opponents will exploit. The belief in invincibility often blinds leaders to the necessity of observation, calculation, and the subtle art of controlling perception. History is replete with examples of leaders undone by this very lie. Emperors, kings, and generals have believed themselves untouchable, only to fall to the schemes of those they dismissed, the ambitions of subordinates they ignored, or the cunning of rivals they underestimated. Machiavelli's observations are clear. The trappings of strength, armies, wealth, titles, and reputation can deceive, but they do not guarantee survival. Power is never inherited, seized, or displayed. It must be actively maintained, defended, and exercised with precision. The illusion of permanence is the most dangerous vulnerability of all. A ruler who truly understands power cultivates not only strength, but also adaptability. He recognizes that the perception of invincibility can be as important as actual force, and he balances boldness with prudence, action with reflection, and intimidation with strategy. Machiavelli teaches that vigilance is the true companion of strength, that foresight is more valuable than confidence, and that an unexamined display of power is often the first step toward ruin. The wise ruler never assumes he is untouchable. He prepares for challenge, anticipates betrayal, and cultivates resilience in both himself and his institutions. The lie of unchallenged strength is seductive because it flatters the ego. It promises security without effort, dominance without strategy, and control without vigilance. Yet those who succumb to it are most at risk, for power is not a static possession, but a living force that demands constant attention. Machiavelli warns that to survive, a leader must temper strength with wisdom, assert authority with calculation, and remain ever alert to the shifting currents of human ambition and desire. Power is preserved not by confidence alone, but by unrelenting awareness, strategic foresight, and the unflinching acceptance of the fact that even the strongest can fall if they underestimate the subtleties of human nature. Power is not a gift bestowed by fortune, nor is it preserved by virtue alone. It is a fragile, ever-shifting force, dependent upon perception, strategy, and an unflinching understanding of human nature. The lies we cling to, believing that goodwill secures loyalty, that absolute truth preserves authority, that universal acceptance is attainable, or that strength alone guarantees dominance, are not harmless illusions. They are poisons that erode influence, blind judgment, and invite betrayal. Machiavelli teaches that the ruler who ignores these truths walks a perilous path, one that leads inevitably to vulnerability and ruin. To navigate the treacherous landscape of power, a leader must embrace clarity over comfort, strategy over sentiment, and vigilance over complacency. Goodwill must be measured, truth must be wielded with discretion, approval must be pursued selectively, and strength must be tempered with foresight. Each action, each decision, each display of authority must be deliberate, calculated, and informed by an intimate understanding of human desire and ambition. The ruler who masters these principles commands not only respect, but fear and influence. He becomes untouchable, not because he is invincible, but because he is unshakable in strategy and unyielding in perception. Machiavelli's warning is timeless. To cling to comforting lies is to surrender power without a fight. Those who understand the subtlety of human nature, the necessity of strategic deception, and the careful cultivation of influence, however, rise above the chaos of ambition, envy, and rivalry. They survive where others fall, they dominate where others falter, and they endure where others perish. Power is not granted, it is seized, defended, and maintained through wisdom, cunning, and the relentless refusal to be deceived by false illusions. The question is not whether the world will challenge you, it will, but whether you are prepared to see through the lies that would destroy you and act with the clarity, strategy, and ruthlessness that true mastery of power demands.